Hey, thanks for being here. Have you ever heard someone say the same sentence for years? And one day it suddenly sounded different. That's where this story starts. Your turn will come. He says it like he always does. Easy, automatic. Like he's reaching for a pen he's picked up 1,000 times. There's a short pause. Papers slide against the table. Then he keeps going. A promotion announcement, new title, bigger scope. Applause starts before the name fully lands. It's her. Again. Someone I trained. Someone who used to sit 2 chairs down from me and whisper questions during meetings because she didn't want to look unprepared. Someone I stayed late for more times than I can count. I wait. For the correction. For the add-on. For the moment where he circles back and fixes it. Nothing happens. My chest tightens. I almost speak. I don't. Interrupting would make it awkward, and I've spent years making sure things never get awkward. My name comes up next. Not with the role, with thanks. There's a dry click when his pen hits the table. Right as he says my name, right as he thanks me for my continued support. Support. That word sits wrong. I look up. He doesn't meet my eyes. That part is new. The clapping spreads. Polite, measured. I keep my hands flat on the table. Still, nobody notices. Or maybe they do, and choose not to. My name is Alicia. I am 46 years old. The newly promoted voice cuts through the noise. A quick thank you. Something about learning from great people. It sounds practiced. Too smooth. Like this wasn't a surprise to everyone. And my head goes somewhere else. Same office. Weeks ago. Same chair across from his desk. He leaned back then, smiled. Told me the role would be mine after I trained the new cohort. Said it slowly, like he wanted me to remember it. I remember nodding. I remember believing him. I remember thinking it made sense. Back in the room, chairs scrape, people stand. Someone squeezes my shoulder on the way out. You ever feel like someone just edited the past while you were still standing in the present? I walk out of that meeting knowing one thing for sure. This isn't delayed. It's being erased. Before we go on, just a quick note. The story you're listening to is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. The characters and events are imagined, but the situations are drawn from real experiences. People don't usually say out loud. I don't confront him. Not yet. I carry the feeling with me instead. Heavy, unfinished. And I know it's not going to stay quiet for long. After that meeting, I didn't fall apart, not right away. I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense yet. I counted, not out loud, not dramatically. Just quiet math while emails stacked up and people kept stopping by my desk. The last promotion, the one before that, then the one before that. Every single name had come through me first. I'd sat with each of them when they were new, explained things twice, sometimes 3 times. Stayed late when they froze on client calls, cleaned up mistakes they didn't even realize they'd made yet. I told myself that was leadership. That was what good teammates did. I also told myself I didn't care about titles, that I liked the work more than the recognition, that politics bored me. Honestly, that was a lie I needed in order to keep showing up. It let me pretend I wasn't watching the same thing happen over and over again. My coffee went cold without me noticing. I kept lifting the mug, getting interrupted, setting it back down. Another question. Another quick thing. People leaned in my doorway like it belonged to them. Later, in the hallway, one of them caught up to me, the newly promoted one, still smiling like the role hadn't fully settled on their shoulders yet. They slowed their step to match mine. A light touch on my arm. You know, they said, almost proud, you're kind of like the team's backbone. Backbone. It was meant to be kind. I could hear that. Appreciation, respect, maybe even gratitude. I smiled because correcting them would have made things weird, but something tightened in my chest anyway. Backbones don't move forward. They stay in place. They hold everything up so other parts can reach higher. If you're nodding right now, yeah, you know exactly why that word sticks. I let them walk ahead. Watched them disappear into a meeting I wasn't invited to. Back at my desk, the noise kept coming. Messages, requests, assumptions that I'd step in, like always. And that's when I stopped calling it bad timing, or office politics, or patience. I called it what it was, a pattern. Once you see it that way, it doesn't feel accidental anymore. The shift didn't come with a speech or a plan. It started with a question. Someone hovered at my desk, laptop half open, already angled toward me like I'd agreed to look. Same issue as last week. Same tone, casual, expectant. How did you fix the sync problem on the pipeline? I told them exactly what to change. Which file, which line, what to restart. They waited. I knew what they were waiting for. The explanation, the reasoning. The part where I'd walk them through why it broke and how to spot it next time. I didn't give them that. They blinked, hesitated, nodded, walked away. It felt wrong, like I'd skipped a step. Like I'd left someone hanging. Then, about 10 seconds later, it felt lighter. I didn't stop working. I didn't drag my feet or miss deadlines. I solved problems the same way I always had. I just stopped turning every answer into a lesson. Stopped diagramming my brain for free. Another message came in. Then another. Slack lit up in that familiar way. The soft pop-pop of notifications stacking faster than I could clear them. Normally, I'd answer everything, quickly, thoroughly. This time, I picked one. Answered it clean. Closed the thread. A follow-up came back. Short, vague. I didn't expand. I didn't rescue the conversation. No announcement, no attitude. No dramatic change anyone could point to. I still showed up early. Still fixed things when they broke. I just stopped doing the invisible extra part. I kept waiting for someone to notice, to pull me aside, to ask if something was wrong. Nobody did. This is where people usually say, I changed. I didn't. I just stopped over-explaining. If you've ever been the person everyone learns from without realizing it, you know how uncomfortable this part feels. By the end of the day, nothing had caught fire, no alarms, no urgent calls. Just a few longer pauses in conversations that used to move faster when I carried them. I shut down my computer and sat there for a second longer than usual, listening to the silence where answers used to go. Nothing broke. Not yet. And that was the part that stayed with me. Meetings start running long. Not productive long. Just circular. People talk more. Decide less. One afternoon, a deck goes up on the screen. A familiar one. Too familiar. My framework. Same flow. Same labels. Different voice explaining it. The explanation skims the surface. Buzzwords. Confidence without weight. Someone on the client side leans forward. You can hear the speakerphone buzz, that low static sound when it's been muted too long. So why does this part hold up under load? The room freezes, not dramatically, just a beat too long. Then someone clears their throat. Another person jumps in with, we've seen strong results so far. Someone else nods like that answers it. It doesn't. The client pushes again. Same question, slightly reworded, polite, patient. Silence stretches. It's uncomfortable now. The kind where people stop looking at the screen and start looking at each other. You can feel it when a room realizes it doesn't actually know what it's doing. It's almost physical. The meeting ends without an answer. Promises to follow up. Action items that don't really point anywhere. Later that day. The question shows up in an email, then forwarded again. Each time, the wording gets softer, less direct. Like maybe the question will disappear if it's phrased gently enough. By the time it hits my inbox, it's wrapped in so many qualifiers it barely resembles what was asked. I read it once, then again. I know the answer. I know it cold. I don't reply. Another message comes in, asking if I've had a chance to look. I let it sit. Slack pings. Then goes quiet. This isn't punishment. It's not even a decision I made out loud. I'm just not stepping in to save the moment anymore. And that's when I notice something shift. People stop asking follow-up questions in meetings. They start talking around them instead. Longer explanations. Less clarity. I still get included. Still copied. Still expected to be there if things go sideways. But now there's a pause where my voice used to be. And I realize something that catches me off guard. My silence is louder than anything I ever said. I wrote the resignation fast. Not dramatic, not angry. Just clear. I read it twice. Then a third time, because part of me still thought this would trigger something. A call, a meeting. At least a pause. I hit send. For a few hours, nothing happened. That silence felt loaded. I told myself it meant people were talking behind closed doors. That someone was deciding how to respond. The reply finally came in late afternoon. Short, polite, detached. He thanked me for the notice, mentioned timing, said we'd coordinate next steps. That was it. No questions. No confusion. No is this about the role. It read like I'd asked to reschedule a meeting. HR followed up the next morning. Different tone, softer, scripted. They framed it as burnout, asked if I'd considered taking time off instead. There was a line about valuing my contributions, another about resources available if I needed support. They spelled my name wrong, just one letter off. Enough to notice, I stared at it longer than I should have. No counteroffer came, no conversation about growth, no let's talk before you decide. And that's when it hit me. They didn't think I was serious. They thought this was a phase, a bluff. Something I'd walk back once things settled. If you've ever handed in something that cost you more to write than it did for them to read, you know the feeling. This is where I almost stayed, just to prove something, just to make them react. I imagined withdrawing the email, letting it turn into another unspoken reset, going back to being reliable, quiet, useful. Instead, I did nothing. No follow-up, no clarification, no reassurance. I let their assumptions sit exactly where they were, and for the first time, I understood the risk I was actually taking. They didn't think I would leave. That was their mistake, and I didn't correct it. The first morning I wasn't there felt wrong, not peaceful, just off. My phone stayed quiet longer than I expected, long enough for me to wonder if I'd imagined my own importance. Then it started. A message from someone I used to sit next to. Not a hello, not even a question. Really? Just a screenshot and a line underneath. Do you remember why this was set up this way? I stared at it. The wording was careful, like they didn't want to admit what they were really asking. Another one came in. Different person, same tone. A call followed. I let it ring once, twice, picked up on the third. They talked around the problem, gave context I already knew, paused in places where an answer usually went, well, what do you think? That used to be my cue. My laptop fan kicked on as I opened a file I shouldn't have been opening anymore. The sound filled the room, loud in a way it never was at the office. I answered one question, narrow, specific. Then I stopped. Clients were next, not asking for updates anymore, asking for explanations. Why something worked, why a process was designed the way it was, why a fix from last quarter couldn't be repeated now. One message came in asking if I'd left documentation. I hadn't. Not because I was trying to prove a point, because no one ever asked while I was there. They just assumed I'd explain it again. Leaving doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like static at first, a low buzz you can ignore if you want to. Another call, this one awkward right out of the gate. So, you're officially gone, right? A pause. We're just trying to understand the setup. I gave them what I was comfortable giving, nothing more. When the call ended, I sat there longer than I needed to, phone in my hand, screen dark. The messages kept coming, slower now, more careful, more honest. And that's when it finally clicked. They weren't panicking yet, but they were starting to notice the gap. And they didn't know how big it was until it wasn't filled anymore. The knock comes in the middle of the afternoon. Not loud, not polite either, just confident. Like it expects an answer. I open the door and he's already talking. No greeting, no small talk. He steps inside like this is still his space. Doesn't sit, stays standing, shoulders tight, eyes moving like he's counting exits. We should have talked sooner. The words come out fast. Things escalated quicker than we expected. His shoe starts tapping against the floor, not rhythm, nerves. Like he's late for something and decided this was still worth squeezing in. He starts listing numbers, revenue at risk, clients asking questions, projects that suddenly need real oversight. Titles get mentioned next, the one I was promised, the one he pretended not to remember. There's a raise attached, a big one. He says the number like it's supposed to land heavy. It doesn't. Then comes the line he thinks fixes everything. I misjudged how much you were carrying. I let him keep going. Don't interrupt. Don't correct the language. Don't help him land the point. The tapping gets faster. This puts us in a tough spot, he adds. But we can make it right. This is the part people think feels good. It doesn't. I look at him and realize something simple and uncomfortable. He isn't here because he understands what he did. He's here because the math finally caught up. I tell him I hear the offer, that I understand the urgency. I don't say yes. I don't say no, not yet. The silence stretches. He's not used to that. He shifts, fills it again, sweetens the deal without being asked. That's when it becomes clear. I don't want what he's offering, not the title, not the money. not the version of respect that only shows up when something breaks. If you've ever waited years for someone to finally choose you, you know how strange it feels when they do it too late. He stops talking, watches my face, trying to read it. I already know the answer. And for the first time since that meeting, it doesn't scare me. I don't dress it up, no. The word lands between us and stays there. He waits, like there's more coming. Like this is the part where I explain myself. The window behind me is cracked open. There's a faint smell of rain, the kind that usually makes people talk longer than they need to. He takes a breath and tries again. We can adjust the scope. Comes out carefully. You'd have real authority this time. Authority. This time. He says it slower, like pace might change the outcome. I shake my head once. That's it. He switches angles, talks about timing, about loyalty, about how hard it is to replace someone with my experience. The words stack up, one on top of the other, like he's building a case he expects me to help finish. I don't. He pauses, looks at me like I missed a cue. So what would it take? I feel the pull of that question, the old habit, the part of me that wants to be reasonable, helpful, clear. I don't give him anything to grab. No, it comes out steadier this time, quieter. That seems to throw him more than yelling ever would. The silence gets heavy, not dramatic, just dense. The kind where you can feel someone running out of moves. If you're listening and thinking this is cold, I get it. I thought that too. You don't owe clarity to people who ignored it before. He straightens, tries one last time, mentions the team, mentions the work I built, mentions how it would look if I walked away now. I look past him. At the space he's already assuming I'll step back into. I'm not coming back. No explanation, no defense, no apology. He nods, finally understanding there's nothing left to negotiate. The tapping foot stills. The pitch drops. I walk him to the door. Open it. Wait. He hesitates. Like he expects me to change my mind at the last second. I don't. The door closes. The sound is softer than I expected. And for the first time, the fear isn't about leaving. It's about how close I came to staying. I don't hear the news directly. It comes sideways. A former teammate texts late one night, not a greeting, just a line dropped like it's nothing. They lost the logistics account. Another message a few days later, different name, same tone. Leadership's shifting again. Third change this quarter. I don't ask questions. I don't need details. The way people phrase it tells me enough. Careful, vague, like they're talking about weather they didn't cause but still have to live under. Someone eventually mentions my old seat. Says it's filled now, new person, smart, eager. I picture them learning the surface fast and the depth slowly, if at all. My calendar looks different. Fewer meetings, more empty space between things. It feels strange at first, like I forgot something important. Then it starts to feel intentional. I begin building something else, not all at once. No announcement, no grand plan, just a couple of conversations that don't feel transactional. Work that doesn't require me to translate myself every 5 minutes. A rumor floats back to me through a mutual contact. A comment made in a closed meeting. We didn't realize how much she handled. Another one follows, sharper. We assumed someone else would step up. They're not wrong. They just assumed wrong. This is where revenge stories usually get loud. This is where someone gets humiliated in public or begs for forgiveness. Mine didn't do that. Nothing explodes. Things just cost more. Take longer, feel heavier. I'm not celebrating. I'm not checking dashboards or waiting for updates. I hear what I hear when I hear it. Sometimes I feel relief. Sometimes something closer to grief, not for the job. For the years I spent explaining things that were never misunderstood. I don't know how I feel yet. That's the honest part. All I know is the noise around me got quieter, and the noise I left behind didn't. And for now, that's enough. Before we finish, let me say this. If you've stayed this long, you probably already know why this ending isn't loud. Some doors don't slam, they just stop opening. The message comes late, one line, careful wording, no pressure this time, no numbers. Just a reminder that the door is still open if I want to talk. I read it once, then again, my phone is warm in my hand. Screen bright, cursor blinking, waiting for me to fix things the way I always used to. I think about the promise that started all of this. The one said casually, like it was already handled. The one I rearranged my time around. I wonder how long the plan was to keep me right where I was. Useful, quiet, easy to delay. I don't feel angry anymore. That part burned off weeks ago. I also don't feel victorious. There's no rush, no sense of winning. Just a steady, settled feeling that surprises me. Done. My phone screen goes dark without a reply sent. No draft saved. No explanation typed and deleted. Just darkness. That's the sound of it ending. I don't know if he ever really understood what he lost, or if he just understood the consequences. I'm not sure that difference matters as much as I used to think. Life doesn't always hand you clean moments. Sometimes it just hands you a choice and waits to see if you'll walk it back when things get uncomfortable. Here's what I learned. And I'm saying this quietly, not like a rule. If people keep promising you a future while benefiting from your present, believe what's happening, not what's being said. And if you finally choose yourself and it feels calm instead of exciting, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It usually means it's real. I don't know if I made the right choice. I just know I won't undo it, and the door stays closed. If you've ever clicked on a story because you sensed something was off before it even started, you're in the right place. What you're about to hear begins at the exact moment I realized a single signature could quietly ruin a lot of lives. I was already holding the contract when I noticed it. Again. One page missing. The verification page. The one that never just disappears by accident. I turned the paper toward her, kept my voice steady, said the words I'd already said too many times. This partner doesn't clear. She didn't look at the page, didn't ask which part, didn't ask why. The pen in her hand tapped once, like she was bored. Then the laugh came, short, sharp, almost playful. Jealousy makes people imagine problems, she said, still not meeting my eyes. My mom isn't going to believe this. The pen moved, no pause, no hesitation, just ink on paper. I stood there, stupidly still. Didn't grab the folder, didn't raise my voice, didn't do anything dramatic that would have made it feel like my decision too. The printer hummed behind me. Warm paper slid into the tray. The smell of toner hung in the air, sharp and bitter. She closed the folder and stood up. Already done with me. I watched her walk out, heels clicking, contract tucked under her arm like it was a trophy. I stayed where I was for a second too long, holding the copy that still felt warm in my hands. That was the moment it hit me. Not fear, not anger. Clarity. Stopping her now would have meant owning the mess. Letting it move forward meant something else entirely. My name is Fiona, 34 years old. I folded the contract, slid it into my bag, walked out without saying another word. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. Names, events, and situations are dramatized for storytelling purposes. Each story carries its own message and does not repeat the lessons of any other. I didn't know it yet, but that walk down the hallway was the last quiet moment I'd have for a while. Everything after that moved fast, too fast to stop. I kept replaying it in my head, like I was checking my own math. Not to feel brave, just to make sure I wasn't exaggerating. The first warning had been gentle, almost apologetic. I slid a note across her desk and pointed at the margin, a soft heads up. Something about mismatched registration numbers. She waved it off without reading past the first line. The second time, I brought data, screenshots, timestamps. I laid them out side by side so she wouldn't have to scroll. Her chair leaned back, arms crossed. The smile stayed. Third time. I didn't bother easing in. I pulled the federal registry entry and turned my laptop so everyone could see the red flag. She squinted, then shrugged. Those lists are always outdated. The fourth time almost didn't happen. I sat at my desk with the draft open, staring at the cursor. My finger hovered over send. I thought about my rent, thought about how easy it would be to let someone else notice. Then I hit send anyway. She never replied. The fifth time was the meeting. Conference room, glass walls. Too many people pretending not to listen. I spoke up anyway. My voice didn't shake. That part surprised me. This partner is restricted, I said. It's not a gray area. Her eyes flicked up. One roll, slow, deliberate. The pen in her hand clicked. Once, twice, loud enough to cut through the room. We've heard this already. A short laugh came from the other end of the table, not even trying to hide it. The pen clicked again, faster now, like a countdown. I stood there, suddenly aware of how long I'd been in the same role, how replaceable caution sounds when money is involved. That was the moment it shifted. Not when she ignored me, when everyone else did too. Quick aside, be honest with me for a second. There's a point where survival starts whispering louder than integrity. You feel it before you admit it. The meeting moved on without me. Different topic. Different voice leading it. I sat down slowly, the pen still clicking in my ears, and understood something I hadn't wanted to name yet. Speaking up wasn't protection anymore. It was a liability. And once that realization settled in, I started thinking less about stopping the deal and more about what would happen if I didn't. I went back to the emails that night. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't shake the tone of them. Too friendly. That was the first thing. Compliments stacked on compliments. Visionary leadership, rare decisiveness. Your instincts are spot on. The kind of language people use when they're trying to keep you moving so you don't stop and check the ground. Every message ended the same way. A soft push. A deadline that wasn't really a deadline, but acted like one. We'd love to move quickly. Timing matters here. Let's not lose momentum. One line sat in the middle of the thread like it had been waiting for me. Let's start with a small test transfer. I stared at it longer than I should have. The coffee on my desk had gone cold. I took a sip anyway and regretted it immediately. A test transfer isn't a test. It's a trigger. Money moves once, and suddenly compliance isn't theoretical anymore. Systems light up, flags get raised. People who weren't watching before start paying attention. I pulled up the calendar, scrolled. There it was. Scheduled, already approved. My name wasn't on it. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a second. Thought about the meeting, thought about the pen clicking. Thought about how fast she'd signed, like speed itself was proof of confidence. The next email came in while I was still staring at the screen. Excited to get started. This partnership is going to change everything. I didn't respond, didn't forward it, didn't flag it. I just saved a copy. Quick pause here. You know that feeling when something sounds too eager to be clean? When it's all forward motion and no room for questions, I swear, it hits the body before the brain catches up. I checked the transfer details one more time. Amount small enough not to scare anyone, just enough to open a door. I closed the laptop instead of sending another warning. The screen went dark. The room stayed quiet. At that point, it wasn't about convincing anyone anymore. The deal was already breathing on its own. All that was left was what happens once the money starts moving. She caught up to me in the hallway before I reached the elevators, not angry, not rushed. That was the part that threw me. Her heels echoed behind us, sharp and steady, like she'd already decided how this conversation would end. Let's be clear, she said, sliding into step beside me. No greeting, no warm-up. I know you're nervous. I kept walking, didn't slow down, didn't look at her. This deal is moving, she continued. And I need you to stop circling it like you're waiting for permission to panic. I stopped then, turned just enough so she could see my face, not defensive, not apologetic. It's not nerves, I told her. It's exposure. She didn't deny it. That's the part people miss when they hear this later. She didn't pretend it was clean. She didn't argue the registry or the transfer. She just leaned closer, voice dropping half a notch. Don't slow this down. The words landed heavier than a threat. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be for half a second. I felt it rise in my chest. Everything I wanted to unload. Every warning, every screenshot, every meeting where I'd been talked over. My mouth opened. Then I saw it. The calculation. Not fear, not ignorance. Just a clean line between what helped her and what didn't. I closed my mouth, nodded once. She watched me for a beat, checking for resistance. When it didn't come, she stepped past me like the conversation had already expired. Her heels moved away, the sound stretching down the corridor until it disappeared around the corner. Quick pause here. There's a moment where you realize silence isn't agreement, it's a boundary. And crossing it would make you responsible for whatever comes next. I stood there longer than I should have. Long enough for the echo to fade. Long enough for the anger to cool into something clearer. The thought didn't hit me right away. It came later, in the quiet, when there was no one left to posture for. If I blocked it now, I wouldn't be stopping a bad decision. I'd be taking ownership of it. And once I saw that, walking away stopped feeling like weakness and started feeling like the last move that was still mine. I didn't sleep much that night, not from panic, from repetition. My brain kept lining things up the same way my hands would the next morning. Dates first, then times, then versions. I pulled every email thread into one folder, labeled them cleanly, not dramatic names, just facts, the original outreach, the follow-ups, the compliments that escalated into pressure. I saved each attachment twice, once as received, once as opened. I noted who was copied and who was conspicuously missing. The system log came next, approval chains, override timestamps. I watched the sequence play out again on my screen, calm and indifferent. The transfer sat there, queued, small amount, small enough to slide under anyone's radar who didn't know what it meant. The laptop fan kicked up, a thin whining sound that always shows up when I push it too hard. I rested my finger on the trackpad, right over the flag option. One click would stop it. One click would freeze the process and send alerts straight up the chain. One click would put my name right in the center of it. My phone buzzed. A message preview lit up the screen. We're all aligned, right? No greeting, no signature, just expectation. I didn't answer. I stared at the flag icon long enough to feel ridiculous, like it was daring me to prove something. I knew exactly how this would be framed later if I touched it. Emotional, obstructive, difficult. I removed my hand. Quick aside. There's a moment when choosing nothing feels heavier than choosing wrong. It doesn't feel brave. It feels quiet and sharp, like stepping back from something that's already rolling. I saved the final screenshot, time-stamped it, closed the folder. The fan kept whining as I shut the laptop. The sound cut off abruptly, leaving the room too still. The transfer stayed queued. I stood up without ceremony, grabbed my bag, turned off the light. By the time I left the building, it wasn't a hypothetical anymore. The deal didn't need my voice to move forward. It had momentum now. All I'd done was stop standing in its way. The call came mid-morning, not from an extension I recognized, not rushed either. Compliance needs to come downstairs. That was it. No introduction, no tone to read into, just instruction. I stood up without grabbing my bag. Didn't shut my screen down. Walked past desks where people were still typing, still joking, still pretending the day was normal. My phone started vibrating before I reached the elevator. I didn't check it. Security was waiting in the lobby. 2 of them I knew, 1 I didn't. He didn't smile. The badge clipped to his belt caught the light as he shifted, metal tapping softly when he moved. Follow us. The doors slid open. The first unfamiliar badge came into view, then another. Dark suits, neutral faces, shoes too clean for the building. They didn't ask for me by title. They already knew. I'm compliance. I offered, more habit than fear. A woman stepped forward, calm, direct. Her eyes flicked to my badge, then past me, already scanning the floor. We'll need access to the partnership records. No accusation, no warmth, just a request that wasn't optional. I nodded, led them toward the elevators without asking for authorization. No one stopped us. That part landed heavier than it should have. As the doors closed, my phone buzzed again. And again. The sound was muffled against my leg, but I could feel the panic in the frequency. Messages stacking, names flashing, people finally noticing something was wrong. Quick pause here. At that point, there's nothing clever left to say. No version where explaining helps. You either cooperate, or you make yourself part of the story. We reached my floor, heads turned, conversations cut off mid-sentence. Someone whispered my name like it might answer back. I logged in, stepped aside, let them take the chair closest to the screen. They worked efficiently, no commentary, no reaction. Just quiet clicks and notes being made. Behind me, phones kept buzzing. Somewhere else in the building, voices were rising. Blame was already looking for a direction. I stayed where I was, hands visible, access open, waiting for the moment someone decided where the finger would land first. The call came through while I was still sitting at my desk. The agents a few steps behind me, talking quietly to each other like I wasn't there. The screen lit up with a name I didn't have saved, but I already knew who it was. I answered. The voice hit hard and fast, no greeting, no checking if I was alone. What did you do? The words weren't shouted. That's what caught me off guard. They were sharp, controlled, like someone gripping the edge of a table instead of flipping it. I didn't do anything, I said. Kept my tone flat. I raised concerns, multiple times. A breath on the other end, short, tight. My daughter says you've been undermining her since day one. I let that sit for a second, not to be dramatic. To make sure I didn't fill the space with defense. I flagged a restricted partner. I documented the warnings. I didn't approve the transfer. Silence. I could picture it then. The pause where anger starts looking for somewhere else to land and doesn't find it. She told me you were being difficult. She signed anyway. Another pause. Longer this time. She said compliance cleared it. No, I said, compliance didn't clear anything. The agents behind me stopped typing. One of them glanced up, then went back to the screen. I kept going. Dates, times, versions, who was copied, who wasn't. No commentary, no edge, just the record. You can hear it when power realizes it can't bully its way out. The breathing changes. The questions stop sounding like accusations and start sounding like calculations. The line went quiet, not disconnected, just held. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, slower. I need copies of everything. They're already being reviewed. Another stretch of silence, then a small sound, like the phone shifting in her hand. The call ended without goodbye. The dial tone buzzed in my ear longer than it should have. I didn't hang up right away. Behind me, the agents kept working. Screens flickered, files opened and closed. Whatever that call was supposed to be, it wasn't protection, it was the first crack. And once that happened, there was no way for family loyalty to outrun the paper trail anymore. The meeting was called fast. Too fast to prepare stories, not fast enough to stop the damage. She was already talking when I walked in, standing, hands moving, words stacking on top of each other like speed could outrun facts. This is being blown out of proportion, she said, pacing a half step, then another. We've done deals like this before. Compliance flagged it late, that's all. Late? Not wrong, just late. Someone cleared their throat near the end of the table. A chair scraped back an inch, then stopped. Nobody told her to slow down. Nobody told her to stop either. I took my seat and set my folder down. Didn't open it yet. The transfer amount was minimal, she continued. Barely more than an administrative test. No intent to. I opened the folder. The sound was soft, but it landed, paper sliding. A pause that didn't belong to her. I laid the documents out in order, not all at once, one at a time. Registry screenshot, time-stamped warning, email thread, approval log. The override entry that shouldn't have existed. She kept talking for a few seconds longer, then noticed no one was looking at her anymore. That's not her voice cut off when she leaned forward and saw the dates lined up. Perfect, ugly, unforgiving. I didn't narrate, didn't explain, just pointed. Then slid the next page over. Someone on the other side of the table inhaled sharply. Another chair moved back, this time all the way. Funny how rules matter again once consequences show up. She tried once more, slower now. Careful. You're making it sound intentional. It was signed after the warning. I said, that was all. No one interrupted me, not once. Not when I listed the sequence. Not when I stopped and let the silence do its job. Her voice didn't come back. The room shifted around that absence. Decisions forming without asking her permission anymore. Authority draining in real time. When it was over, the folder stayed open in front of me. No one asked me to close it. That's what accountability looked like in practice. Not loud, not dramatic. Just no way out. It didn't happen the way people imagine consequences happen. No raised voices, no escorted exits, no slammed doors. The contract was voided in a sentence read aloud without emphasis. Someone slid the document across the table, already marked, already done. The signature at the bottom was still there. It just didn't matter anymore. Her authority went next, not announced, not debated. Just removed from the list of approvals. The shared drive updated while we were still sitting there. Access revoked, permission stripped. Quiet clicks replacing what used to feel untouchable. She stood near the end of the table, arms crossed so tight it looked like she was holding herself together. When the decision landed, her jaw flexed once. That was it. No one asked her to speak. A legal advisor cleared his throat and mentioned next steps. Temporary reassignment, ongoing review. Language clean enough to sound merciful. Nothing about intent, nothing about family. She didn't look at me, not once. Not when the contract was taken, not when the authority disappeared. Her eyes stayed fixed somewhere past my shoulder, like I wasn't worth the effort anymore. I returned the favor. Someone opened a drawer near the wall. The signature stamp went in. The drawer closed. The lock turned. The sound was dull. Final. Quick aside. Is losing power worse than losing your job? I couldn't tell from where I was sitting. All I knew was the room felt lighter without it pressing down. The meeting ended without ceremony. Chairs slid back. People checked their phones again. Normality rushed in too fast, like it always does. I gathered my folder, slid the last document inside. No one stopped me. No one thanked me either. As I walked out, I heard her voice for the first time since the decision. Make sure this doesn't happen again. It wasn't aimed at me. It didn't need to be. I kept walking, didn't turn around, didn't slow down. By the time I reached my desk, the system had already updated. My access was still there. Hers wasn't. Whatever I'd won, it didn't look like relief. It looked like space. And space, I was starting to realize, comes with its own weight. They moved me the following week, not with an announcement, not with applause. A calendar invite, a short conversation, different reporting line, more authority, less noise. The new role came with access I didn't have before. Direct channels, fewer meetings where people talked in circles. No one framed it as a reward. No one framed it as damage control either. It was positioned as necessary. I preferred that. There was no apology. Not from her, not from her mother, not from anyone who'd watched it happen and stayed quiet. I didn't expect one. Apologies don't fix systems. They just make people feel lighter for a minute. Late one night, I stayed after most of the floor had emptied. The lights hummed overhead, steady and indifferent. I sat there with the screen dimmed, not working. Just replaying the moment in the hallway when I nodded instead of arguing. I could have blocked it. I still know that. One click, one escalation, one email sent to the right person at the right time. I also know what would have happened next. My name attached to the mess. My judgment questioned. My motives picked apart until the facts didn't matter anymore. Stepping aside didn't feel clean. It didn't feel brave. It felt cold and precise and final. Someone passed my desk and paused. A junior analyst I barely knew. She glanced at the door to my new office, then back at me. "I'm glad you're here," she said quietly. Not gratitude, relief. That landed heavier than any title. Here's the lesson I'm left with, and it isn't pretty. Doing the right thing doesn't always mean stopping someone. Sometimes it means refusing to carry their decision for them. Sometimes integrity looks like documentation and restraint instead of confrontation. I didn't stop it. I stepped aside, and I live with that choice every day, not as a victory, as ownership. The moment my CEO asked why I arrived in an Uber instead of the SUV he had assigned me, everything in that building shifted. I stepped away from the car and barely had time to straighten my bag before his voice cut through the noise. Loud, confused, not private, not gentle. He asked where the SUV was, the one he had personally approved for my work. I froze. Not because I had done anything wrong. I froze because I didn't understand what version of events he was talking about. And I could feel the room turning toward me, waiting. Before I could get a word out, my manager slid into the space like this was his cue. Easy posture, half smile, the kind that usually means he already thinks he's won. He said he needed it more, just like that. No explanation, no apology, no hesitation. Like it was obvious. Like I was supposed to nod and step aside. The smell of coffee on his breath hit me as he spoke, and that stuck with me more than the words. Coffee and certainty. He didn't even look at me. His eyes stayed on the CEO, like I wasn't part of the equation anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even move. I stood there gripping my badge between my fingers, suddenly aware of how small that piece of plastic made me feel. My name is Kara, and I am 30 years old. I have learned, the hard way, that moments like this don't come with warnings. 1 second you think you're doing fine. The next, you realize decisions have been made without you, about you, and long before that morning. No one around us spoke up. Not one person. The silence felt practiced. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't about a missing vehicle. This was about permission, about who was allowed to take and who was expected to adjust. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. It is inspired by real workplace dynamics, real power imbalances, and situations many people recognize. but the characters and events are fictional. At the time, standing there in front of my CEO and my manager, I didn't know any of that yet. I only knew one thing. Whatever had been decided, it hadn't included me. He didn't stop after that first line. He kept going, like momentum itself was on his side. Words started stacking up. Priority, bandwidth, coverage. He angled his body toward the CEO, shoulders squared, voice steady. The SUV, apparently, was better used elsewhere. Uber worked fine for me. He even added a small nod in my direction, like I should appreciate the flexibility. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. That made it worse. The CEO stayed quiet. No interruption, no raised hand, just watching. That silence pressed down harder than shouting ever could. It told everyone who had the floor and who didn't. I felt my mouth open, then close. I had a few chances right there. I saw them as they passed. I let them go. I told myself I'd speak when it mattered more, which is something I tell myself a lot and almost always regret later. The smell from the copy room drifted out when someone opened the door behind us. Burnt dust and toner. I've noticed that smell every time I've swallowed a complaint instead of saying it out loud. My body recognizes the pattern before my brain does. He kept framing it as reasonable, as efficient, like this was already settled and we were just catching up. His hands moved when he talked, calm, practiced. He never once checked my face. Someone near the entrance shifted their weight. Another person looked down at their phone. No one stepped in, not to help, not to disagree, not even to ask for clarification. I stood there, badge still twisted between my fingers, realizing how easy it was to sound right when no one challenged you, how confidence could replace permission if you carried it long enough. By the time he finished, the story had a shape, one where his decision made sense and mine didn't need to exist at all. The CEO finally moved, not toward me, but toward the building doors, a subtle motion, an unspoken signal. We were going inside. The CEO finally spoke once we were inside, and he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The SUV wasn't optional. It wasn't a courtesy. It was approved. For me, for client travel. He said it like he was reading from something that already existed, something settled. My stomach dropped, not relief, pressure, because approval meant intent, and intent meant someone crossed a line on purpose and kept walking. My manager reacted fast, too fast. Words came out clipped and stacked, like he was racing a clock only he could hear. Temporary decisions, coverage gaps, short-term adjustments. His hands moved again, palms open, the universal sign for reasonable. The CEO didn't nod. He didn't frown. He waited. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I remembered the email from weeks ago. One ping on my phone during a late afternoon call. Subject line short, polite. I'd asked when I could pick up the keys. Then nothing. No reply. No follow-up. I told myself it was fine. I told myself people were busy. He kept talking. The word temporary showed up again. So did efficiency. The CEO let him finish. That pause did more damage than any interruption could have. Approval means there's a trail, paperwork, dates, names. The CEO didn't list them, but I could tell he was already counting. The manager tried a softer angle. He mentioned client needs without naming any. He said the SUV had been better utilized. His eyes flicked toward me for half a second, then away, like checking whether I was still there. I stayed quiet, not frozen, watching. The CEO asked for the assignment file. No tone change, no accusation, just the request. That was the shift. The kind you feel before anyone admits something's wrong. I thought about how easy it had been to ignore that unanswered email. How easy it was to tell myself it didn't matter yet. How much energy I'd spent being low maintenance. A folder landed on the table. The room leaned in without moving. The folder slid across the table and stopped right in front of me. No ceremony, no warning. My name was on the top page. Typed clean, correct spelling. That part was fine. My eyes dropped lower and caught the signature at the bottom. It looked like mine at a distance. Same letters, same length. But the slant was wrong, too careful, too slow. I write fast. I always have. When I'm rushed, my last name tilts hard to the right and the final line cuts off early. This one didn't. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't ask for a pen. I didn't look around the table to see who was watching. That's not my signature. That was all. The room went still in a way that felt physical, like air pressure changing. The HVAC kicked on with a soft click and kept running, louder than it should have been. The CEO didn't react right away. He studied the page again, then looked up, not at me, but at the man sitting across from him. My manager stared at the table. His jaw tightened. He didn't glance in my direction, not once, not even a reflex look. That told me more than any argument could have. The CEO asked where the document came from, no edge in his voice, just the question. Someone from operations spoke up from the side, explaining the standard process. Assignment forms were logged, signatures verified, files stored digitally and in print. The CEO nodded, slow. He asked who had submitted this one. My manager shifted in his chair. The movement scraped loud against the floor. He said his team had handled the logistics. He said it like that was supposed to be enough. The CEO slid the page back toward the center of the table. Face down this time. Pull the original submission, he said. The full chain. No one argued. No one joked. No one filled the silence. I sat there with my hands folded, realizing how strange it felt to hear my own name detached from my control. Printed and signed without me, like it had never belonged to me in the first place. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a misunderstanding and started feeling deliberate. The CEO's attention shifted back to me, finally. But it wasn't accusatory. It was direct. He asked whether I had followed up after not receiving the keys. Yes, I answered. 3 times. That part came out steady. The next part didn't feel as good. I admitted I hadn't copied anyone. No human resources, no operations, no one above my manager. I said I thought it would get awkward. I said I thought patience counted for something here. That staying reasonable was the professional move. No one interrupted. That silence felt different than before, heavier, less forgiving. Someone from information systems pulled up the logs on the screen without being asked twice. A quick scroll, dates lined up, subject lines I recognized instantly. Polite wording, short requests, all of them opened, none of them answered. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to, not because I was surprised, because seeing it laid out like that made it impossible to keep pretending it had been accidental. The CEO leaned back slightly, arms crossed. He didn't look at me when he spoke this time. He looked at my manager, so these were received. My manager nodded, a small motion, barely there. He said things get missed. He said inboxes move fast. He said nobody was intentionally ignoring anything. Nobody challenged that, not out loud. I felt heat rise in my face anyway. Embarrassment, sharp and specific. Not for sending the emails. For trusting that silence meant delay instead of dismissal. For telling myself I was being easy to work with, when really I was making myself easy to overlook. The CEO asked for timestamps, asked who had access to that inbox, asked how many similar requests had gone unanswered in the past quarter. My manager shifted again. His confidence thinned, words slowed, explanations stretched longer than they needed to. I kept my hands folded. I didn't jump in. I didn't defend my choices. The facts were already doing more work than I ever could. For the first time since this started, the room wasn't leaning away from me. It was leaning toward the gap my silence had created. He finally looked at me. Not all the way. Just enough to aim. He said I wasn't senior enough for the vehicle. Said I didn't have the visibility yet. The words landed clean. Like he'd been waiting to use them. Like this was the part where the problem became me. I almost laughed. The sound got stuck halfway up my throat and died there. Last quarter. That same mouth had praised my numbers in a team meeting, out loud, clear enough that people had clapped. He'd stood beside me then, nodding like my success reflected back on him. I didn't remind him. I didn't need to. The CEO shifted in his chair and asked why the assignment file still listed my name if I wasn't qualified to use what had been approved. That pause mattered. My manager cleared his throat. Once, then again. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. Buying time. Said the file hadn't been updated yet. Said processes lag sometimes. Said things change faster than paperwork. The chair legs scraped against the floor as he adjusted his position. Loud, sharp. The kind of sound that cuts through a room. The CEO didn't respond right away. He let the explanation hang there, thin and stretched. Then he asked who was responsible for updating assignments when priorities shifted. My manager answered, slower now. He named his team, not himself. The CEO nodded once, wrote something down, didn't share it. I stayed still. I didn't jump in to defend my work. I didn't list projects or clients or hours logged. I'd done that before, in other situations. It never changed anything, not like this. What changed the room was the mismatch. Praise on record, approval in writing, my name still attached. His story starting to wobble under its own weight. He noticed it too. His confidence didn't disappear all at once. It thinned, cracked around the edges. The words started coming slower, like each one needed checking before it left his mouth. The CEO closed the folder in front of him and pushed it slightly to the side. He didn't look at me when he spoke next. He looked straight at the person who had just tried to turn the focus away from himself. And the balance shifted. This was the part I didn't see coming. He didn't turn to me, didn't ask for my side, didn't check whether I was ready to explain myself or defend anything. He skipped me completely, like my role in this had already been established. His chair shifted, slow and deliberate, until it faced my manager. By what authority did you reassign the vehicle? No edge, no volume, just the sentence. My manager didn't stop. That was the mistake. He filled the space immediately. Like silence scared him more than saying the wrong thing. He talked about operational discretion, about acting in the company's best interest, about making judgment calls in fast-moving environments. Each phrase stacked on top of the last one, taller and shakier. The CEO stayed still, no nodding, no interruptions, no reassurance. He let the explanation stretch until it started contradicting itself, until words like temporary and necessary tripped over approval and documentation. I felt my heart beat in my ears. My hands had gone cold without me noticing. I pressed my fingertips together under the table, grounding myself in something solid. My manager leaned forward, then back. He mentioned conversations that hadn't happened, decisions that hadn't been logged. He referenced authority without naming where it came from. The CEO asked another question, shorter this time. Who approved that change? The answer took longer. Too long. My manager glanced down at the table, then toward the screen, then back up. He named a process, not a person. The CEO wrote something down, just one line. Then he closed his notebook. The room felt different after that. Quieter, but not empty. Heavy in a way that meant something had been decided, even if no one had said it out loud yet. I realized then that I wasn't being questioned because I wasn't on trial. I was evidence. My manager was still talking when he noticed it. His voice shifted, lost its smoothness. The confidence he'd walked in with had nowhere to land anymore. I stayed silent, not because I was scared, because there was nothing left for me to add. The damage was already happening. And it wasn't coming from me. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the part that stayed with me. No raised voices, no security call. No one escorted anyone out. The CEO stayed seated, hands folded, and spoke like he was closing a routine agenda item. The vehicle assignment was being corrected, effective immediately. The audit team would review the reassignment trail. Expense reports tied to the vehicle would be flagged and held. Each sentence landed flat, administrative, final. My manager nodded along, once, then again, the nod people use when they want to look cooperative. He even managed a tight smile, like this was uncomfortable but manageable, like he understood the process. He didn't. Someone from finance spoke up from the far end of the table, already pulling up reports. Another person from compliance added a note about timelines and scope. Names were exchanged, calendars were checked. The machine turned on without hesitation. The CEO didn't look at me when he said the SUV would return to its original assignment. He didn't need to. The correction spoke for itself. He also didn't look at my manager when he mentioned restricted approvals pending review. That landed anyway. The room smelled like stale carpet and old air, the kind that settles in late afternoon when meetings run long. No one shifted in their seats anymore. Even my manager stayed still, hands clasped, posture careful. The confidence he'd walked in with had nowhere to sit. I watched him process it in pieces. First the reassignment, then the audit, then the expenses. His nod slowed, his jaw tightened. He was still upright, still employed, still present, but the space around him had changed. He wasn't in control of it anymore. The CEO closed his notebook and stood. That was the signal. Chairs scraped back, laptops shut. People started moving again. careful not to make eye contact with anyone they didn't want to be associated with. As we filed out, my manager stepped aside to let me pass, not deliberately, instinctively. I walked by without stopping. The keys would be sorted later. The review would take time. None of that felt urgent anymore. What mattered was that the noise hadn't come. The system had done this quietly. And that was worse for him than any scene could have been. I felt lighter than I expected. Not relieved, unburdened, like something heavy had been set down without asking my permission. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel small walking out of that room. Human resources reached out the next morning, not urgent, not cold. The tone that tries to sound helpful without taking sides. A meeting was suggested. Mediation, a chance to clear the air. I said no. The word came out cleaner than I expected. No pause, no explanation. I didn't offer an alternative version of events or ask what it would look like. I told them I wanted a transfer instead. Different division, same building, new chain of command. There was a brief silence on the other end, then a careful acknowledgement. Paperwork would follow. Timing could be quick. They asked if I was sure. It wasn't revenge. I didn't need to watch anything unravel. I didn't need apologies or confessions or some formal moment of accountability where everyone nodded and pretended we were all better now. I wanted distance. Clean lines. A door that closed and stayed closed. The transfer request went through by the afternoon. A confirmation email, a start date, a new manager copied in. No drama attached to it, just movement. I ran into my old manager near the elevators later that day. He stopped short when he saw me, looked past my shoulder, checked his phone like it had just buzzed. That was new. He used to hold eye contact like it was currency. I didn't slow down. I didn't adjust my path. I didn't give him anything to read into. I stepped into the elevator when the doors opened and let them slide shut between us. The ride down was quiet. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored wall. Same face, same posture, something steadier behind the eyes. I signed the transfer documents before leaving, returned my old access badge, picked up a new one from security. The plastic felt the same in my hand, but it didn't carry the same weight. When I walked out that evening, I didn't look back at the floor I was leaving. I didn't need to see how things settled or who said what after I was gone. The choice had already done its work, and it couldn't be undone. He was gone a few months later, no announcement, no farewell email, no meeting where someone pretended it was mutual. His name just disappeared from the internal calendar one morning. Meetings reassigned, access revoked. People stopped lowering their voices when his name came up, because there was no reason to anymore. I heard it in passing, the way these things always surface. Someone from another team mentioned it while waiting for coffee. No details, no sympathy. Just a fact that had already settled. By then, I had the SUV. The keys showed up through operations without ceremony. A short email. A pickup time, that was it. I signed once. My own signature this time. Clean, familiar. I barely thought about the vehicle after that. It did what it was supposed to do. Got me where I needed to go. Nothing more. Some days, I still took Uber. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Old habits don't vanish just because circumstances change. Sometimes choice looks exactly like routine from the outside. I never forgave anyone. That word never came up, not even in my head. I also didn't chase closure. There was no conversation that wrapped things up neatly. No final exchange where everyone agreed on what had happened. I didn't need it. What stayed with me was the move I made, the transfer, the refusal to mediate, the decision to step out of a system that had already shown me how it worked when I stayed quiet. That choice locked behind me the moment I signed the papers. There was no undo button for it, and I didn't want one. I saw my reflection differently after that. Less apologetic, less flexible in ways that only benefited other people. The lesson didn't arrive all at once, and it wasn't elegant. It came in pieces, through consequences I didn't manage and outcomes I didn't control. But it stuck. Here's what I learned. When someone takes something from you and counts on your silence, the most powerful response isn't to take it back loudly. It's to stop offering access altogether. Once you decide what you will no longer give up, everything else rearranges itself around that line.